I don't think that's supposed to be happening. Welcome back to the wet coast. In my last forge video, you saw me install the transmission and the engine, and I thought I was a lot closer to getting it running than I actually was because of my list. Well, today I'm gonna get that stuff done. I think maybe most of that stuff done anyways. So my ultimate goal for this phase of the forge is just to get it running, and to do that, I've got a few more things left to do, obviously. Install the carburetor, radiator hoses. I need to get the gas tank in, which means I have to notch it for clearance for the differential. Transmission cooler, I'm going to modify it where it's actually got forced air and a fan. I've got to replace the U-joints on the drive shaft, install the drive shaft. Exhaust, really? Do I need it? Maybe not at first. We'll see how loud it is, because I got some open headers on there right now. That could be a lot of fun. I've got to get the transmission lines in and install a shifter so I can actually select forward and reverse. This is probably an afternoon's worth of work, right? Anyways, I'm gonna get to it. First thing I'm gonna do, working back to front on the truck, is replacing some universal joints in the drive shaft. And that way I can get the drive shaft installed, move forward a little bit, start working on some transmission lines, etc., and knocking stuff off this list. In with the new. Well, that ain't right. I went and wrecked that one. Yeah, so in my haste, I was just a little bit too brutal using the impact tool. It's a four-wheel drive ball joint extractor and installing tool. It works great for universal joints. If you're gentle, you can see I busted the end cap right off of the universal joint trying to push it in. Normally I install these and I put the caps in opposite sides inwards, but this time I thought I could just be clever and do a shortcut and just push the cap through with the spider itself. Lesson learned. It's an $8 part, not too big of a financial hit. I've got some spares. I'll be a little more careful. Oops. And in with the new. And it's going to go springing everywhere. And it's done. A slightly gentler touch and a little more patience was just what the job called for. I can be as guilty as anybody else in trying to take shortcuts. So anyways, hope you learned from this little mistake that I made. Front drive shaft U-joint is fine. I'm just going to install this drive shaft and continue with the work. Oh yeah, I'd just like to show you how bad these U-joints were on the original drive shaft of the Forge. This is one of the end caps. Nothing but rust and needles. The drive shaft is done, installed. Let's go cross that off the list. All right, replace U-joints. Done. Install drive shaft. Done. Moving forward, I'm now going to tackle the radiator and the hoses, because after that I need to do the transmission lines and the transmission oil cooler. So this one is next. Alright, I got the rad ready to go. I'm going to pop it in the engine bay right now. One thing to note, if you're ever converting an F-Series truck, so 49 to 52 I believe, and you need a radiator, the Chrysler 38086 fits perfectly. There's another part number on here too, I'm not sure if that matters, 3736930, but it fits like a dream, and I'm going to put it in now. Now, while I said it fit like a dream, doesn't mean it fit perfectly. Width-wise, it's great. It the previous builder did is they just ran bolts through the original radiator mounts here to this flange bolt here. It was only mounted on the top, no mounts down below. So what I'm going to do is just quickly fabricate some sleeves and some bolts and make another hole somewhere on the flange down there so that it's anchored at both the top and the bottom. Yeah, I think I'll do that. And on that side too. Oh, that looks good, doesn't it? Some bare wire there. Well, I am rewiring the whole truck before I take it through inspection, so that doesn't matter. That ain't going nowhere. Okay, that was quick and easy. Radiator and hoses are installed. Crossing that off the list. Let's do the carburetor next. Run into a slight snag with this part of the carburetor linkage bumping up against the valve cover. So I'm gonna need to put a spacer in between the carb and the manifold. I mean, wide open throttle all the time is fun, but doesn't work for stop and go traffic. Much better. All right, carburetor is installed and I'm crossing it off the list. Next, I think I'll do transmission lines and the transmission cooler. So this is the transmission cooler that I'm going to install. Unfortunately, the radiator that I have in the truck doesn't already have a transmission cooler integrated into it, so it'll just be this. The cooler is rated up to like 14,000 pounds of towing, so it should be adequate to the task, but I'm only putting it in just to get this truck through inspection. It's a Hayden Automotive. It comes with a lot of fittings to make it work with my particular installation, or a universal installation, I suppose. And the transmission cooler is in. Okay, transmission lines in. Transmission cooler in. And that thing radiates quality, if I don't mind saying so myself. Getting a little late, gonna continue this task list tomorrow. Well, it's another day and I'm gonna get the alternator and the new distributor installed. Let's go. Happy times. I did get the alternator in finally. Unfortunately, it was really hard to get the camera in there because I was messing around with a bunch of different spacers and things like that to find out the optimum way of getting the belt aligned properly on these pulleys, but it's done. Time to get this distributor in. This is a new unit that I bought from a company called A-Team. It uses an HEI distributor cap and it's fully self-contained other than the coil. Looks to be a nicely made unit and it should just pop right in there and we'll get it indexed to cylinder 1, and I already have the engine sitting at top dead center on the compression stroke, so all I need to do is put this in. I'm going to put a little grease on the gear so it doesn't start dry, and then she's going to be one step closer to running. It's just a little bit of axle grease and it'll dissolve in the motor oil and shouldn't cause any problems. One of the really nice things about old engines like this is quite often they have the firing order printed right on the manifold. Makes things a lot easier, but also that was before times of the internet. Okay, the ignition wires are in. It's a bit of a dog's breakfast right now, but I'm not too worried about that because I just want to get the engine running and make sure everything is running fine. Once that's done and it's drivable, I'll tidy up these wires and make them nice and neat and not in danger of getting themselves wrapped around the fan. Now I gotta run some vacuum lines and put in some coolant, I think. It's exciting. Okay, so I didn't record it, but I went ahead and I did a few little itty bitty things just to get the engine to the point where it should start once I put gasoline in it. I installed an MSD blaster ignition coil I had kicking around on the fender wall. I ran the vacuum hoses, and now I'm just gonna throw in a battery and a little bit of gas down the carb and see if she kicks over. Houston, we have a problem. Either they're the wrong intake manifold gaskets for this engine, or the heads have been cut at a different angle and the manifold is not seating properly, so the coolant is just leaking out between the intake manifold and the heads. So I am going to pull off the manifold and see what's up. This was not anticipated. Okay, so I've confirmed that the gaskets are the right ones, but it looks to me from the witness marks here, like the rusty water, the head was not seated properly and it was allowing coolant to come down and out the back. I think what I'm gonna do is just go back to the old high-rise manifold. Came off this engine and I know it fits perfectly. I was kind of hoping to avoid that because I don't really want to run a single plane manifold with a 4-barrel carb in this truck, but I do want to get it through inspection. So I'm just gonna go with what I know and get that set up now. All right, I've got the high-rise manifold all cleaned up, sealed, mounted, torqued, the whole shebang. Didn't bother recording that because it's pretty boring stuff. Just cleaned all the mating surfaces, cleaned up the gaskets, put a bunch of silicone in there and torqued it all down. So tomorrow I am gonna throw a carburetor on this thing and we'll see if she fires up. Well, it's the next day and fall is here, both literally and figuratively. Rained a bit last night, so I want to get this thing running. What I did, which I did not record, was get the adapter and the 2-barrel carb all installed. I just have to add fuel. I've got the vacuum lines all hooked up. I've got the ground all hooked up. Battery's ready to go. I'm going to add some fuel and let's see if she'll start up. Oh, I have also added coolant and there's no leaks. Well, I just added water just in case there were leaks, but no leaks. Looks good. Let's see if we can get her started. I'd say that's sounding promising. So I've been messing around with the engine for an hour now and I cannot get it to idle and I can't get the RPMs down, even though I've got the idle adjustment all the way as far down as I could. And that told me that I've got a vacuum leak somewhere, and I used some quick start to figure out where that leak is, and I'm gonna show you how that works. It's a handy tool if you're trying to diagnose a leak somewhere in your intake system. So it's a little hard to see, but it's right behind where the carb sits on the adapter. There is a big leak behind there. I'm gonna turn the engine over, it won't start, and then we're gonna start spraying in the back of the carb and you'll see how it starts. And as soon as I stop, it stops too. Well, there's your problem right there. There's a great big gap between the gasket and the base of the carb and the carb adapter, which opens up right in here, creating a massive vacuum leak. Well, I feel like an idiot. This chamber here looks to be like some kind of balancing chamber between the 2 barrels of the carburetor. There's a vacuum port on here, which I've got plugged off because I don't need that one. It's probably for power brakes. This truck obviously does not have them. So putting the gasket here, you can see those 2 holes are just wide open to the atmosphere. So there's no way I'd ever get this carburetor to work without fixing this problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a pattern, and I'm going to cut a steel plate out that will seal this area. I'll silicone the carburetor to the steel plate, and that will act as an intermediate between the carburetor and the adapter and get me the vacuum that I need without some crazy opening to the air. Well, there it is. It's going to sit right there. All of this just so that I can seal off this back edge right here against the plate. Let's go put this thing on and see if I get a better experience with running this engine. Well, the carb is all hooked up and mounted with that new backing plate that I just made, and I've got the fuel line hooked up. Let's throw a little spark at it and see what she does, shall we? Well, she runs, and she runs pretty good. Throttle response is nice and snappy. I know my timing is pretty close. I've got to hook up a light to it and just make sure that's spot on. And now that I've had the engine running for about 15 minutes, a couple of other things have popped up, which comes as no surprise. One of them is the alternator's not charging. I don't know if this alternator ever worked when I got the truck, so I'm gonna put a new one on. I'll probably just get a one-wire alternator and not worry about voltage regulators and stuff like that. And the other thing is that I've got a small leak coming out from the bottom of the radiator. I don't know if that's the hose itself that goes in or the radiator itself has got a crack or a leak. I'll have to check into that. If you liked the video, why not hit the thumbs up? And if you haven't subscribed yet, why not subscribe? I've got a lot of fun videos planned, from bikes to bees to vans to this old girl here. Regardless, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.